Welcome to my debate of the week, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to who are the best big men in wrestling. Originally, I said in my TNA review that I would be covering who is the best big man. But then I had to think about it because it's so hard to pin down just one all-around best wrestler who's a very large wrestler. And we're not just talking about just large, heavy-set wrestlers. We're talking about tall wrestlers or very well-built wrestlers. So I'm going to kind of make it more specific. But I am also going to go by the people that I enjoyed in the past and current present now. So the person I'm going to talk about first is Big John Studd. And to me, he's the first big wrestler I ever saw. And let me give it to you like this. The first wrestler I ever saw, and I've always said this, has been Bob Backlund. And after him, I saw Bruno Sammartino, and I thought he was the largest wrestler I've ever seen. Because Bob Backlund was a smaller wrestler than him, but Bruno was like this, cock diesel. I mean, he wasn't defined and cut, but he was just a big guy. And that was before I saw Big John Studd. And I think I was about 9 years old when I saw him for the first time. And I saw him, I was shocked. I thought, he's so big, he could eat somebody. He scares me. I think I said that to my parents at the time. I was about 9 years old. It was 1980. But when I saw him, he was the largest wrestler I ever seen. It was before Andre the Giant. But I remember him that he could move around fast in the ring, and he even had a couple of storylines before he left. I think 1984 he left wrestling, WWF left wrestling. But I remember that very fondly, that he was the first big guy I ever saw. But also, not trying to be nasty here, at that time the sex industry, the porn industry, was really beginning to take off in cable. So I had heard about porn at that time. And hearing about Big John Studd kind of got me a little confused about is wrestling sex at that time, because porn stars were also coming out with names like Long Dong Silver and stuff like that. And it kind of went over into the sex bit. Not good that a 10 or 11-year-old even hears about that kind of stuff or hears about it. But that is how things were. And in a sense still is. People are still doing it. For me, it's a fond memory that I saw the largest wrestler in my life, but then it kind of filtered into sex. Weird? You tell me below. The next person I'm going to talk about is the Big Boss Man. Now this is a legit large guy who did work well in the ring, who had a very big build, who actually could talk pretty damn well, and had one hell of a presence. This is a guy that I was legitimately afraid of because, I mean, I didn't really cause any trouble as a kid, but I remember one of my relatives telling me at the time when he was around, he said, "You keep that up, I'm going to call the Big Boss Man to take you and put you in jail." He told me and a couple other cousins of mine, and when we saw him on TV, I got scared. My other cousins are saying, "Oh, this is bullshit." And they said, oh, and the one that said this is an older cousin. That was their younger cousins, and said, "Really?" And in my case, what they did when we didn't listen, I mean, I did listen to a certain extent, but I did follow them. I was a little kid at the time. Because I liked following my cousins. They brought in a big friend of theirs that was like about 300 pounds, a big guy, and that scared the crap out of them. Like, I was already scared. But Big Boss Man, to me, really typifies what a really monster, not a monster heel, but a really good big man heel is. He knew how to talk in the ring. He knew how to work outside the ring as well, and how he did his promos, how he beat down his opponents, and how he just demoralized his opponent. I didn't really see all of what was going on between him and Big Show back in the 90s because I was not really watching a lot of wrestling, but I did see a little bit of the funeral scene and what happened with his dad. I'm talking about Paul White, the Big Show. But you get my point. He was always a really good guy, and it's sad to see him gone for quite a long time, and he died early, I believe. The next person I'm going to talk about is Yokozuna. Now, I did manage to see a couple of times during the 90s Yokozuna. And I thought he was a legitimate Japanese guy, even though he was basically Samoan. I didn't know. I didn't understand how basically sumo wrestlers work, that people from other countries can come in, learn sumo, and actually dominate in the sumo wrestling industry. Excuse me, I'm a little sick. But I didn't know that at the time. That was during the early 90s, and I was quite naive. But Yokozuna just gave that look of a real, honest, legit sumo wrestler that can honestly knock your teeth down your throat with just some hand thrusts, baby. Knock you out. And I thought the way he worked with Bret Hart was really good. I did see some videos later of some of the older wrestling matches with him, and The Undertaker was really good. When he worked with Bret Hart was actually pretty good. I think there was, who else did he work with? I cannot remember exactly. There was more than a few other guys he worked with. That was just really good, that I enjoyed. I wished he hadn't died so young. Another person that's a big guy, well, became a big guy, was Rikishi. Rikishi is one of my most favorite wrestlers from back in the day. And I always loved Rikishi. I always thought that he was a great wrestler. He had a great gimmick. He had the best music. He knew how to dance in the ring. He made you think of Michael Jackson, baby. And I always feel really bad that he hasn't come back to WWE and done something like with his sons. And if you guys saw Total Divas talking, making it simple, Jonathan, who is basically Jimmy Uso, and that is Rikishi's, one of his twin sons. He gets married. He doesn't show up at the wedding. He promised that he would be there, but he never did show up. And that upset me, because that's mainly for my woman. That is for Naomi. And that upset the crap out of me. And I wish that he had been there. But also I wish that he was working in WWE as a manager for his sons, because I really believe that if their father was there as their manager, not saying that he would make things work for them better, like on the road, keeping them from spending too much money. Those two look like, and I'm talking about Rikishi's sons, they look like they're grounded and know how to handle themselves. But I believe they would get farther in the business and get better storylines, get more better gimmicks. They could have had something better years ago if their father had worked with them. The next person I'm going to talk about, well, I mentioned him earlier, The Big Show. He started in WCW, and from there he moved to the WWE, and he's done, I'll put it to you like this. The Big Show has always been a middle of the line type of wrestler. He's never been like a real, honest, legit superstar for them. He hasn't. He isn't like the Big John Studd was back in the early 70s, late 70s, early 80s, where he really was a very high star. He wasn't like a Hulk Hogan. Of course, we'll talk about him as well. But you get my point. He is more of a middle of the line type of guy, that he may not always get it all done well, but he's always somebody you can depend on in the wrestling business to at least get some decent heat or some decent pops. And I've always appreciated that. He's always been a good wrestler. Now, I've already mentioned Hulk Hogan. We got to mention him. Hulk Hogan, who is a legit big guy. And when I saw Big John Studd at one time face him, they're almost exactly the same size. Admittedly, Hulk Hogan's a little bit larger than him, but not by much, if I remember correctly. Big John Studd wasn't 100% bigger than Hulk Hogan. He wasn't, but he was a big-ass dude. But Hulk Hogan, who truly helped flip the wrestling industry on its side and made it what it is today. Well, made it what it was during the Attitude Era. Let's be honest here. It used to make 10 times more money than it does now. They have declined a lot since the Attitude Era. They were making big money. They were. And that's mainly because of Hulk Hogan. He just had that type of attitude and look that drew the people in. And he is somebody that will always go down in history as one of those people who truly changed the wrestling business, good or bad. But he's one of those people that really changed it. The next person I'm going to talk about, which really is the most memorable person that you can ever remember as a big guy, that's Andre the Giant. That man is generally the largest man that ever existed. Not just in height, but in size. Now, it's really sad to see that Andre the Giant died the way he did in such agony because he never did get the gland corrected like the Big Show did. He got his gland changed. Well, he had surgery on his, I don't remember what type of gland it was, but essentially the gland that allows you to keep growing, that stops at a certain age. Both of them had the same type of gland that just kept going. And unfortunately, Andre the Giant never had his done in time. He died, and unfortunately it was so sad, and I believe I did a video on him. But as a legit full-size 7-foot man, he was. He was over 7 foot or nearly 7 foot tall. He generally had the size. He had the ability to run around in the ring. He had the ability to do power slams. He had the ability to do basically every move that any ordinary wrestler does today. He did it back in the early to mid to late 70s. No, early 60s, late 60s, early 70s. By the late 70s, he couldn't do those things anymore. He was just getting too big and physically was not able to work. And by the 80s, you know what's going on. He just couldn't do it anymore. But even in the end of his life while he was still wrestling, he still made an impact that has never been forgotten. The man died in 1993. I was 22 years old. Everyone is still talking about him now because of how he impacted all of wrestling. And even though you got, I'm going to tell you something, brother. Me and Andre the Giant are going to WrestleMania 3, and we are going to turn the world upside down. Essentially, WrestleMania 3 truly made Hulk Hogan, and that was because of Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant was what made wrestling back in the 60s and 70s and even the early 80s. Then Hulk Hogan took over from that, and he ran with it until now. And that's something that just can't be forgotten. The next person I'm going to talk about, and I believe this will be the last one, is George the Animal Steele. Now the reason I'm adding him in this, who is the best big man in wrestling, is because he was just the most fun, ridiculously silly characters you can think of. The guy was already a great wrestler back in the 60s and the 70s, and when he was nearing the end of his run, he was already in his mid to late 40s. He shaved his hair off and started biting the turnbuckle to show how out of his mind crazy he was. That's how great he was. He could go from being a legit heel type of wrestler normally to a beloved, nutty, unbelievably crazy wrestler that people just loved. And I wish we had a wrestler like that these days. Someone who's just plain beyond crazy but so much fun. And Eli is not that bad when he was acting a little crazy, but he's no George the Animal Steele. Let's be honest here. But as a big guy, he had such an impression on so many people, and he impressed me. So this is my list of everybody I believe is a very great big man in wrestling. Some of the best. I mean, there's a lot I'm leaving out. I could put in Big Bad Vader. I could have put in Bam Bam Bigelow, of course. He's great. But I wanted to focus on the ones that I did see that I really loved a lot. And I felt at that time when I watched it, had such an effect on wrestling and myself. But I would love to hear your feelings about this and tell me who you believe were the best big wrestlers that you saw from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, into the 2000s. These are the ones I want to hear. So I hope you enjoyed this debate of the week. Please give me a comment below. Tell me what your feelings are, and I'll be getting my next video out as soon as possible. Peace out!